I think we're ready to go. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, joining us. My colleague and I'm Tyrell Connor. I'm associate professor at SUNY New Paltz. Ryan, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Ryan LeCount, associate professor at Hamlin University, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Great. So yeah, we're really happy and excited to have this opportunity to share what we've been working on this past year and continue to work on going into the summer. Some really excited things. As you can see by the title here, this project we're mainly focusing and looking at Black Americans owning firearms legally. Our intent here is to do a national mixed methods exploration of this to try to just get an idea of the attitudes and the perspectives of Black gun owners around the country, which really has not been done to the capacity that we're trying to extent that we're trying to do this. And so this is really near and dear to our heart for a lot of reasons, which you'll probably hear throughout this presentation. Before we get to that, I just want to, of course, thank GVRC for helping assist by funding this project. That's really helped us a lot, getting a lot of the groundwork off the ground. Happening when we talk about the just data collection, which is largely a lot of what we've been doing this past year. And without them, we would be much more earlier in the process than we are today. So we're really excited and gracious. Phil, I have a lot of gratitude for them assisting us with that, and also providing this opportunity for us to share this research too. I think that's a really great component added along to this what they have going on. Just a quick outline of what we intend to do and discuss today. A little bit of background of how we stumbled upon this research idea and led into it. The methodology, what we are doing, the dominant framework of what's kind of leading our thinking into going into this research and the questions we're asking and showing some of those relevant questions. A couple of things of what we've been learning so far. Like I said, we're still in the data collection, but we have been finding some notable trends that we will share with you all today. And as we dive deeper into, I think we'll get even richer data and outcomes associated with this. And of course, we'll talk about next steps after data collection is complete, what we intend to do, and what you'll be able to see from us moving forward. Really quickly, just want to give a little bit of background information about how we again stumbled upon this project. It actually kind of started personally for me. I have two children. At the time I had just my daughter, and she was about 6 months, and this was during the January 6th insurrection. And I was sitting at home just watching the news, probably like most people at the time, in awe and shock, upset, a lot of different feelings I had at that time. And as I was watching the news and seeing all the imagery and what was happening, I was also looking at my 6-month-old daughter and was like, what kind of world are we living in? And as someone who has never had or wanted firearms, I made those steps to purchase firearms. I felt that the country was heading into a situation where things became more real, became more violent. I think the lack of response I saw from the government initially when we saw the insurrection is something that really startled me and really hit home. And I think having children as well led me to that action of moving forward. And I currently live in New Jersey, of purchasing my first firearm. And the interesting thing is, after I purchased my first firearm, I was kind of left with this feeling like, now what? I wasn't passionate about having firearms. I wasn't an enthusiast. I did the trainings. I did what I had to do. I learned how to be responsible with this and handle it appropriately. But I feel like a lot of the things I saw in popular media or on the news of folks who own firearms was this a lot of excitement and enthusiasm of owning it. I didn't feel that, and I thought that was kind of strange. I'm like, am I weird for feeling this way now that I have this? And so naturally, I wanted to kind of look and read up and see, how do other Black firearm owners feel when they own a firearm? Is it what we've been seeing a lot of, kind of more publicly facing, or a lot of folks, are there folks who kind of feel like me, not as enthusiastic or kind of hesitant about owning these firearms, but feeling the need because of safety and what we've been seeing in this country when it comes to hostility, especially racial hostility. And to my surprise, there was very little research out there, very little discussion on this. And so naturally, as a researcher, I wanted to take this a step forward and see what we can do to try to answer these questions. I linked up with the National African American Gun Association, NAGA, and partnered with them and pitched this idea. And they were very interested in helping us getting some participants. And then, of course, I linked up with my colleague. We go way back, Ryan, to graduate school, who was already familiar with some of this research, and his passion, his excitement for it, of course, was just a perfect match. And then we move forward with this project, and this is kind of where we are today and been working on since last August. Um, so the methodology we'll be doing, using, or we are currently using, is just happening in two stages. The first one is qualitative interviews, which we've been doing for the past year. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then stage two, which will be starting this month, is actually a national survey that's informed from the themes that we've been gathering from um, the qualitative interviews. And we'll talk more about that the latter half of this presentation as well. Just kind of where we're at right now with the semi-structured interviews. We have about 55 conducted. They've been happening via Zoom. Again, like I said, we partner with NAGA. They've been really helpful with getting a lot of folks because they have a national reach. And so our goal was just to try to get as many data, as much data collected in many of the regions as possible. And we've been pretty successful with that. As you see, the interviews last about 60 minutes, so we're getting a lot of rich data, spending a lot of time with these folks, and having the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. The ages from 25 to 70, education level varies, but most folks in this sample have been college educated. And then, of course, we're going to transcribe. We've transcribed and then have in vivo. We're going to plan to use flexible coding strategy to answer some of these questions and find some of these themes when we really start to dive deep into the data. So we're really excited about that. Um, Again, up until June, July, we're still going to be collecting interviews. Our target now is going to be predominantly Black women. They naturally have been, not naturally, but they have been more of an elusive demographic when it comes to this, and we can share some of that maybe in the Q&A or a little bit later as far as our challenges with recruiting this particular population.
So thanks again. It's my great privilege to work with Dr. Khan on this project. And as we were talking about the work that's been done, one of the big glaring holes in work on gun violence and attitudes about and experience with firearms more generally is that work often centers the experience of white folks and of white men in particular, who are of course overrepresented as gun owners. And so we talked a lot about making sense of the experience of these populations that are often ignored in the research. And we had some conversation about work that had been done before, and this framework offered by a fantastic sociologist, Monica Bell, who does work at Yale, to make sense of a broader kind of orientation toward the legal system and the law, really seemed like it might be a useful framework to try to understand what we thought we would see. So there's this concept that's often used in criminal justice from Bell's work called legal estrangement. And it's this idea of being racialized as a Black American, as someone who's alienated from, separated from institutions that are supposed to serve and protect all citizens. And so as you start to think about how and why Black firearm owners, in particular, we were interested in Black women who've represented a significant number of recent purchasers, women in general, Black women in particular, how their experiences might differently guide their pathway to firearm ownership. And so this framework we were interested to see if this framework of legal estrangement might be part of that story and might make it distinct from the experience of other firearm owners.
Okay, thank you. And here are some of the questions that, and we're not going to, of course, go through all of them, that we have been asking and are looking to get answers for. The ones in the middle are some ones that we're really, really excited to get answers for, particularly, again, like Ryan said, Black women. We've seen the numbers. Why are they picking up more firearms? And we've been getting some pretty interesting answers so far. Also, political beliefs. As many of you probably know, right, Black Americans are typically very much associated with the Democratic Party, and we've been seeing kind of the larger conversations around gun regulations and firearms, and how do they navigate that compared to those who might be on the right and own firearms as well. And then also, are there differences between Black and white firearm owners and their perceptions related to politics, related to law enforcement, just lifestyle, overall behavior of owning, and reasons of why owning a firearm. Um, so we're looking forward to getting answers to some of those questions. So some of the things we've been learning so far is that there's more political variation than expected, in a sense that even speaking to most of them are um, still left leaning, but have are less likely or more hesitant to identify or say that I'm a Democrat. Right? We hear see more people say I'm independent. I don't know how I feel about the Democratic Party anymore. And some of these frustrations and internal conflicts have becoming more prevalent. And a lot of it does stem from the firearm policies. Um, Most of the respondents, though, do not consider a politician's stance on firearms when voting. So when I ask the question, kind of like how high firearm policy, gun regulations are on your priority list when voting, many of them say it's not high at all. They say other things are important. Education is one that's probably come up the absolute most compared to others. Of course, economy, all those kind of things, community, civil rights, social services, etc. And so it falls lower on the list, maybe compared to the white counterparts who are more gun enthusiasts or hold firearms at home. We've been finding that increased racial hostility is a major driving factor as far as why many of the Black firearm owners are buying and purchasing firearms. Similar to my story, many of our respondents have been feeling similarly, that what we've been seeing in the news, the Trump administration, et cetera, have caused us to purchase more firearms at a higher rate. COVID comes up a lot, and of course, the January 6th insurrection comes up a lot too. And then most do support some form of firearm regulation, although this can vary from just having a permit to restricting and removing a lot of firearms that we have readily available. But it's rare that you'll find anyone that says we don't need any regulations or any kind of restrictions. And then Black women have been found less likely to publicly share and discuss firearm ownership. Many of them own it, but will not share it with their close network, their friends, their family, church members, right, employee, colleagues, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and also, many of them have changed their stance on firearms over the course of their life. It's not uncommon for some of them to say, "I was completely against owning firearms. Didn't want to have firearms in the home, and now I own firearms." Here's just a quote that kind of illustrates that when we're discussing and talking about racial hostility, like we mentioned a few times here. This quote comes from a Black woman who's 49 years old, who's married, identified as a liberal, is a registered nurse. She has two daughters and owns 15 guns. In this quote, she says, "All the things that were going on against Blacks in the country, I just said it was time. I thought about it for a very long time. It was a big decision. It was a heavy decision. Like I said, I've never owned a firearm, and I had my husband get rid of his firearms once before we had our first child. It just seemed like more and more hatred was coming out in the media outlets, on social media, and I feel like Trump opened the door for a lot of white people to be extreme and be violent and let it be okay that they can get away with that." And so this is just one of the examples, but it's the common general sentiment we've been seeing from a lot of the Black women as far as why they decided to pick up firearms, and it has to do a lot with racial hostility and what we've been seeing since COVID. I don't know, Ryan, do you
So
want to take the?
yeah, thank you. And so a couple of other themes that we wanted to highlight, the identity piece, and these are things that have come up in other presentations today. Rosie's work, among others, made reference to this. The way that folks say that the approach of firearm ownership, in terms of the role of family, in terms of how, when, and why folks acquire guns, how that works socially, how it shows up in their lives. Folks are reporting that their sense of being a gun owner is different than it is for most white folks. And in particular, one thing that we've heard a number of folks say, I don't think that we expected to hear this as so prominent, was folks are saying, being a gun owner is not a primary part of our identity. It's an important part of my life. A respondent will say they take it very seriously, we're really engaged with it, but it's not something that is first and foremost extremely salient compared to other parts of identity. Just to echo this point from Dr. Connor earlier today, there is this, we see in the data with white samples that there's a strong correlation between ownership and attitudes about regulation or attitudes about gun politics in general. There's much looser kind of association here with our response. You sort of see that folks are very supportive of, as he said, a variety of measures. It does vary, but there really, really is a lot of folks who will be very supportive of gun safety and own guns at the same time. And we do see a really, really significant and consistent pattern across all kinds of political differences, across class differences, across geographic differences, across gender differences, of general concern about estrangement from, alienation from, disconnection from, a sense of absence of protection of the law enforcement community. That's a really consistent pattern. So we have one quote here that I think is pretty illustrative. It comes from a 61-year-old Black woman who's a physician. She lives in the northeastern United States, owns quite a few firearms, 33 firearms, married, 2 children. I don't feel like they're here to protect me. I don't feel protected by police officers at all. A white person may feel protected by a police officer, but I don't. Like I said, in my neighborhood, they're going to show up after the bullshit's already gone down, and I'm going to be on my own when it comes to protecting myself. That's bad because homes in my neighborhood start at 250 or 300,000. I don't feel like when they look at us, they all feel like pulling the trigger at another human. I don't think they see that. No, it's not the same. When I'm looking down the barrel of my gun, I'm thinking about a criminal, period. I'm not thinking about the color of the skin, but they really do seem to shoot differently when it's us versus them. Just briefly here, a few minutes left, so to be very quick, we're now getting ready to undertake our national representative sample survey. So one of the big goals here is to compare for the very first time, a large sample of Black Americans who own guns to those who don't. And this work is, of course, to be informed by all of the great themes that have emerged from our qualitative work. One thing that we have found is it's really important for us to make sure that we're balanced both on gender for lots and lots of reasons I think we can talk about in the Q&A if we have time, and socioeconomic status, given that our qualitative sample is a little over-educated. And again, a big goal, I think, for us is to reorient the discussion to center the experiences of Black folks and maybe Black women in particular. So I guess I should say very, very quickly, one of the other additional things beyond extending, in the interest of time here quickly, beyond extending what we're finding in our own qualitative research is to ask a bunch of questions about patterns that have been established in the research, about attitudes and behavior. What kinds of things lead to gun storage practices? What kinds of things lead to preference for home protection versus sport? How are those things connected to politics and other kinds of things? And to center the experience of Black folks and to see how those patterns might be unique or different.
Great, thank you. And I'll just leave this up here just to show the next steps, but we can briefly get the quick Q&A. And I know I see a couple of questions in the chat. Really quickly, I know I see Karen asked a question about concealed carry. Concealed carry has been very important to this population. When asked compared to open carry, they said no way, simply because they feel that they would be treated a lot differently by law enforcement or just the general public if seen with a firearm open and publicly. And so they feel like concealed carry is very important to the Black population for a lot of external safety reasons, dealing with a lot of social elements, etc. And many of them who do and have the ability to practice concealed carry do practice concealed carry. So it's not just about being in the home. Many of the respondents have and do carry outside of the home as well. Is there a predominant type of firearm being purchased among these gun owners? It ranges. Most folks do have pistols and handguns. And what you will see is that those who are purchasing more firearms do venture out and have shotguns, do have ARs, do have rifles. So it's a wide range overall. No, the start of pandemic is a reason. Yeah, I think some folks did note when we talk about the pandemic that the extreme, just overall, a lot of fear was happening. So some folks said, it's time, especially, particularly some women who were single moms and felt like they didn't have maybe a male presence or anyone else to help them, another adult in the home, were more likely to pick up firearms because of that reason, the fear of like theft, the fear of not having enough resources, which is spread around the country. That played a factor into some of these folks too. Any other questions? I know we're running out of time. All right. Well, thank you all. I think we're at time. I know we don't want to push into other folks' time, so we appreciate this and having the quick moment to be able to share some of our research and show what's to come. And I see some folks want to touch base and connect. We're more than happy to do that, and really looking forward to doing that after this. After we wrap up here, please let's connect and chop it up some more.
Thank you very much, folks. Thank you.
Thank you all.